Welcome to Cheater Confessions. Let's get started with today's story. People always say that cheaters eventually confess. My wife never did. The truth landed in my hands before Vivian ever opened her mouth, and it came on a faded receipt that should have been in a trash can. It happened on a Thursday afternoon. Vivian had borrowed my pickup that morning because her SUV was getting serviced. After work, I climbed into the truck and realized the parking garage ticket was missing. I needed it to leave the lot, so I figured she had tossed it into her purse. That wasn't unusual. We'd been married for 8 years. Looking through each other's bags wasn't some forbidden thing. I found plenty of random junk first: lipstick, receipts from grocery stores, a charger. Then I found one folded piece of paper tucked into a side pocket. I almost ignored it. Instead, I unfolded it. The receipt came from a convenience store on the opposite side of the city, nearly 40 minutes from both her office and our house. That alone caught my attention. Then I looked at what had been purchased: one bottle of 12-year bourbon, one bottle of red wine, 2 microwave dinners, travel-sized toothpaste and shampoo, a box of condoms. My hand stopped moving. I read the list again. Then I checked the time. 7:12 p.m., 3 nights earlier. That was the exact night Vivian had called me. "I'm sorry, Griffin. A commercial client changed everything at the last minute. I'll be stuck here until at least 9. I remembered laughing. "Don't worry, I'll save you dinner." "Don't. I'll grab something later." Apparently she had, just not where she'd claimed. I folded the receipt carefully and slipped it back exactly where I'd found it. No yelling, no accusations. Not yet. That evening she came home looking perfectly relaxed. She kissed my cheek. "Long day." "Yeah?" I asked. She kicked off her heels and smiled. Felt like I spent my whole evening inside the office. I leaned against the kitchen counter. "So, you never left?" She looked straight at me. "No. Why?" "Just making conversation." She laughed. "You sound like a detective." "I build office buildings," I said. "Not cases." She smiled and walked upstairs to change. I watched her disappear around the corner. 8 years together. Not once had I caught her lying. Now she'd done it without blinking. That night, after she fell asleep beside me, I stared at the ceiling instead of closing my eyes. I wasn't wondering whether she had cheated. The condoms had answered that. What I wanted was proof that couldn't be explained away. If Vivian had built another life behind my back, I wasn't going to confront her with guesses. I was going to confront her with facts. Once I had them, I wasn't planning to forgive her. I was planning to leave. The next morning, I called the only person I trusted to keep his mouth shut: Trevor Dawson. We had worked construction together for nearly 12 years. He wasn't the kind of man who filled silence with opinions. If you asked him for help, he showed up. That's exactly what he did. That Friday afternoon, we sat inside his old pickup across the street from Vivian's office. Trevor glanced at the entrance. "You sure about this?" "I wish I wasn't." He nodded once. We waited. At 5:36, Vivian walked out carrying her leather work bag and a small overnight duffel I'd never seen before. Trevor noticed it too. "Business meeting?" "Not a chance." She climbed into her SUV and pulled into traffic. We stayed several cars behind. Instead of heading toward our neighborhood, she drove south. Past downtown, past the shopping district, past the office parks. Eventually the buildings became warehouses and repair shops. The streets grew quieter. Then she turned into a side road beside the airport. My stomach didn't tighten. It settled, like it already knew where this was going. Halfway down the road stood a cheap roadside motel. The sign buzzed as a few letters flickered on and off. 3 pickup trucks sat in the parking lot beside 2 rusted sedans. It wasn't a place people chose for vacations. It was a place people chose because they didn't want to be seen. Vivian parked near room 18. She checked her phone, looked around once, then climbed out carrying the duffel. Trevor lowered his window just enough to see better. "Griffin." "I know." I pulled out my phone and took a picture of her SUV parked outside room 18. Then another of the room number. Vivian unlocked the door and disappeared inside. Less than 2 minutes later, another vehicle pulled in. A black sedan. I aimed my phone again. A man stepped out wearing jeans and a blue polo shirt. He wasn't rushing. He looked comfortable, like he'd done this before. I snapped 2 more photos as he walked toward the room. He knocked once. The door opened immediately. I recorded a short video as he stepped inside and the door closed behind him. Trevor looked at me. "You want me to go over there?" "No." "You don't want to know who he is?" "I already know enough." Everything was time-stamped. Everything was clear. Trevor exhaled slowly. I hate being right. So do I. We sat there another 5 minutes. Not because I needed more proof, because I needed one last minute to accept that my marriage had ended. Trevor finally started the truck. Home? I shook my head. No. Where then? My lawyer. He looked at me. You move fast. I don't waste time fighting over something that's already dead. He didn't argue. Neither of us spoke during the drive. By the time we reached the attorney's office parking lot, I wasn't angry anymore. I was focused. Vivian thought she had fooled me. She had no idea she had just given me everything I needed. I wasn't going to walk into that motel room. I was going to walk out of her life. By Monday morning, I already had 2 appointments. The first was with my attorney. The second was with a construction company nearly 3 hours away. I handled the lawyer first. His name was Walter Brooks, a man in his 60s who had seen enough divorces to know when someone had already made up his mind. He looked through the motel photos without saying much. Finally, he slid them back across the desk. You want revenge, he said. I want out. Those aren't the same thing. They're not. He nodded. Then don't do anything stupid. Let me handle the legal side. I can do that. Before I left, he gave me one piece of advice. Don't tell her you know. I wasn't planning to. That afternoon, I drove to meet the owner of a construction company in Pine Ridge, a small town nearly 3 hours away. The owner, Harold Bennett, shook my hand firmly. Trevor says you're one of the best foremen he's worked with. I get the job done. He smiled. I like simple answers. When can you start? Whenever you need me. 2 weeks. You've got yourself a foreman. One problem solved. The next was finding somewhere to live. I rented a small 2-bedroom house on the edge of town. Nothing fancy. Just a fenced yard, a garage, and enough space to start over. The landlord handed me the keys. You moving with family? No. Fresh start? You could say that. Over the next 2 weeks, I became a man with 2 lives. Every morning, Vivian kissed me goodbye. See you tonight. You will. Every evening, we ate dinner together like nothing had changed. She talked about difficult clients, coworkers, weekend plans. I listened. I even smiled when it made sense. While she believed everything was normal, I quietly dismantled our life. The first things I moved were my tools. Vivian never questioned why my truck was loaded. Construction workers moved equipment all the time. Then came hunting gear my father had left me. Family photographs, important documents, my grandfather's watch, boxes of clothes she rarely saw me wear. Every trip removed another piece of my life from the house. She noticed nothing. I also opened new checking and savings accounts in only my name. Every few days, I transferred money I had earned before our marriage into the new accounts, exactly as my attorney advised. Nothing illegal, nothing hidden, just protecting what belonged to me. Then I changed passwords, email, cloud storage, retirement accounts, everything. Vivian never asked why she couldn't log into my laptop anymore. She simply assumed I'd updated it for work. She had become comfortable. Too comfortable. The following Thursday, she walked into the kitchen while I was making coffee. I'm going away next weekend, she said. Oh? She smiled. The girls planned a spa retreat at Lake Emerson. Just us. Massages, wine, relaxing. I looked up. Sounds expensive. Everyone pitched in. When do you leave? Friday afternoon. I nodded once. Have fun. She smiled and kissed my cheek before leaving for work. The second her car disappeared, I pulled out my phone. There was one person I needed to talk to. If Vivian had lied once, I intended to catch her doing it again. I called Melissa White. She and Vivian had been friends since college. We weren't close, but we'd spent enough birthdays and cookouts together that she knew my number. She answered after a few rings. Hey, Griffin, everything okay? Yeah, I just had a quick question. Sure. Vivian said you girls are heading to Lake Emerson next weekend. There was a pause. What are you talking about? The spa trip. Another pause. Then Melissa laughed, but it sounded confused. There isn't a spa trip. I stayed quiet. Vivian told you that? She did. I haven't seen Vivian in almost a month. That was all I needed. I thanked her, wished her a good day, and hung up. There was no anger, no disappointment, just confirmation. The motel hadn't been a mistake. It hadn't been one bad decision. It was a second life. That afternoon, I called Walter Brooks. I've got another lie. I figured you would. I'm ready. So am I. He explained exactly what I needed to do over the next few days. Nothing dramatic, nothing illegal, just careful planning. By Friday morning, every important document was already in my new house. The utilities for my new place were active. My new employer expected me Monday morning. Everything was ready. Vivian came downstairs wearing jeans, white sneakers, and a light sweater. She carried the same overnight duffel I had seen outside the motel. Funny how obvious things became once you knew the truth. She smiled while pouring herself coffee. "I'll probably lose cell service up there." "I'm sure you'll survive," she laughed. "I'll text when I can." I nodded. She walked over and wrapped her arms around me. "I love you." I looked her in the eyes. "So that's what we're saying now?" She frowned. "What does that mean?" I gave a small shrug. "Nothing. Long week." For a split second, I thought she looked nervous. Then she smiled again. "You work too hard." "So I've been told." She grabbed her bag and headed for the front door. "See you Sunday." "No," I said quietly. She looked back. "What?" I said, "Drive safely." She smiled one last time. "I always do." The front door closed behind her. I watched through the window until her SUV disappeared around the corner. Then I checked my watch. 8:11 a.m. I didn't waste another second. The moving trailer I had reserved pulled into the driveway exactly 5 minutes later. Trevor climbed out first. Behind him came Harold Bennett. Trevor grinned. "Time to finish this." "It is." The three of us worked quickly. There wasn't much left. The bedroom furniture I had purchased before marriage, my television, my tools, boxes already stacked in the garage, the dining table my father had built with his own hands. Everything that legally belonged to me went into the trailer. Nothing more, nothing less. By noon, the house barely looked lived in. I stood alone in the living room one final time. 8 years, reduced to empty walls. I slipped my wedding ring off. For a moment I stared at it. Then I slid it into my pocket. Vivian wasn't getting a dramatic goodbye. She wasn't getting a letter. She wasn't getting an argument. Silence would say everything I needed it to say. I locked the front door behind me, and I never went back. I started my new job that Monday. By the time Vivian came home Sunday afternoon, I was already settled into the little house in Pine Ridge. I didn't see her reaction. I didn't need to. Trevor filled me in the next morning over coffee before work. "You've got a fan club," he said. "I can imagine." "No, you can't." He pulled out his phone. "She called me 14 times yesterday." I raised an eyebrow. 14? And left 6 voicemails. "What'd you tell her?" "The truth." "Which was?" "I said I hadn't seen you." That part wasn't even a lie. By then, I was already 3 hours away. Trevor chuckled. First, she sounded worried. Then he mimicked her voice. "Trevor, please." Griffin disappeared. His truck's gone. Half the house is empty. I don't know where he went. A second later, his expression hardened. Then she got angry. He switched back to his normal voice. "You're lying. He told you. Just tell me where he is." And? I hung up. That wasn't the end of it. She called my younger brother, Owen. She called 2 men I worked with. She even showed up at my parents' house. My father answered the door. Later that evening, he called me. "You want to know what she said?" "I already know." "No, son, you don't." I stayed quiet. She cried. That surprised me less than it would have a month earlier. Dad continued. "She kept saying she just wanted to explain." "What did you tell her?" "I asked one question." "What was it?" "Were you honest with my son?" I smiled despite myself. "What did she say?" "Nothing." "Then?" I closed the door. That conversation lasted less than 3 minutes. It was all it deserved. Over the next several weeks, Walter Brooks handled everything else. Vivian was officially served with divorce papers. She tried calling from different phone numbers. I blocked every one. She sent emails. They went unanswered. She even mailed a handwritten letter to my parents asking them to convince me to meet her. Dad burned it without opening it. Meanwhile, life kept moving. Work was steady. The crew respected me. The house slowly started feeling like home. One evening, Harold invited me to help rebuild a playground that had been damaged during a storm. "Town volunteers are meeting Saturday," he said. "You in?" "I'll be there." That morning, I met someone I wasn't expecting, a nurse named Claire Sullivan. She spent the day handing out water bottles, carrying lumber, and giving orders like she'd been running construction sites her whole life. At one point, she laughed and looked at me. "You build things for a living? How could you tell? You measured those boards 3 times before cutting them." My father taught me to do it right. Smart man. So, I've always believed. It was the first real conversation I'd enjoyed in a long time. For the first time since leaving Vivian, I realized I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was building something better. I just didn't know Vivian still hadn't given up looking for me. Nearly 2 years passed before Vivian finally found me. Not because I made a mistake, because someone else did. By then, Pine Ridge felt like home. I had been promoted to project manager. Claire and I had been together for over a year, and life had settled into something peaceful. The past rarely crossed my mind anymore. Then, one Saturday afternoon, our town hosted a fundraiser to restore an old veterans memorial. Half the community showed up. Construction crews donated materials. Local restaurants brought food. Claire volunteered at the registration table while I helped assemble picnic benches with my crew. Around noon, a photographer from the local newspaper asked everyone to gather for a group picture. None of us thought much about it. The article ran online the next morning. Apparently, Vivian saw it. I was flipping burgers at Harold's backyard cookout 3 days later when Trevor walked over holding a bottle of soda. "You've got company." I looked toward the driveway. A silver SUV had just stopped outside the gate. The driver's door opened. Vivian stepped out. She looked nothing like the woman I had married. Her expensive clothes had been replaced by plain jeans and an oversized sweater. She had lost weight. Dark circles sat under her eyes. She looked tired, not physically, defeated. Conversations around the yard slowly faded as people noticed her walking toward us. Claire came to my side without saying a word. Vivian stopped a few feet away. Her eyes locked onto mine. "I finally found you." "I can see that." She looked at Claire, then back at me. "So, it's true." "It is." Her voice cracked. "Can we talk?" "We're talking." "No, privately." I shook my head. "Anything you have to say can be said here." She swallowed hard. "I've been looking for you for almost 2 years." "I know." "Why wouldn't you answer me?" "Because I didn't have anything to say." She took another step closer. "I made mistakes." "You made choices." "They were the same thing." "No." She looked down at the ground before meeting my eyes again. "I ended it with him." "I'm sure you did." "It didn't mean anything." "It meant enough to rent a motel room." She froze. For the first time since arriving, her confidence disappeared completely. You knew?" I pulled my phone from my pocket. Even after 2 years, I still had the photos. I opened the album. Room 18, her SUV, the black sedan, the man walking through the motel door. I handed her the phone. She stared at the screen. Her face went pale. You don't have to explain." Tears filled her eyes. "Griffin, please. You lied to my face." "I know. You looked me in the eye and told me you were working." She couldn't answer. "You told me you loved me before every motel visit." Her shoulders dropped. "I was going to tell you." "When?" Silence. "When he left you?" More silence. I took my phone back. "You didn't lose me because of one mistake." I looked directly into her eyes. "You lost me because every lie made the next one easier." She started crying. I didn't move. Neither did Claire. For the first time in 2 years, Vivian finally understood why I had disappeared without saying goodbye. Vivian stood there wiping tears from her face, but no one around her said a word. The backyard was silent. My friends knew enough to stay out of it. Claire stayed beside me, calm and steady. Vivian looked at me one more time. "I've replayed that weekend 1,000 times." "I haven't." She lowered her head. "I deserved that." "Yes." She took a slow breath. "I lost my job 6 months after you left." I didn't respond. "I sold the house." Still nothing. "My parents barely speak to me." I simply listened. "I've paid for what I did." I folded my arms. "No." She looked confused. "You paid for getting caught." Her eyes filled again. "I've regretted it every single day." "I believe you." Hope flashed across her face. For 1 second, she thought those words meant something. They didn't. "I believe you're sorry," I continued. "That doesn't mean I owe you another chance." Her shoulders slumped. "I don't know how to live with what I did." "That's your responsibility." She glanced toward Claire. "Does she know?" Claire answered before I could. "I know everything." Vivian looked embarrassed. Claire continued calmly. "He told me the truth before we ever went on our first date." Vivian nodded slowly. "I guess I deserve that too." "You do," I said. I reached into the inside pocket of my jacket. Walter Brooks had mailed the final divorce decree months earlier after the court finished everything. I had kept one certified copy, not because I needed it, because I had a feeling this day would eventually come. I held the envelope out. "What's that?" "The last thing I'll ever give you." She opened it with shaking hands. Inside was the signed final judgment ending our marriage. Her eyes moved across the pages. When she reached the last signature, she stopped. "It's really over. It was over the night you walked into that motel." She closed the folder slowly. "I kept hoping you'd come back." "I never was." She nodded once. No argument, no excuses, just acceptance. Then she reached into her purse and pulled out something wrapped inside a tissue. She unfolded it carefully. "My old wedding band. I've carried this since the day your attorney mailed it back." She held it toward me. "I think it belongs with you." I looked at the ring for a moment. Then I shook my head. "No." She frowned. "Keep it. Griffin. It's yours now." She stared at the gold band resting in her palm. "It stopped meaning anything to me a long time ago." Her fingers slowly closed around it. "Goodbye, Griffin." "Goodbye, Vivian." She turned around and walked toward her SUV. This time, I didn't watch her leave. I picked up the spatula. Harold laughed from across the yard. "Burgers aren't going to flip themselves." "No," I said with a small smile. "They won't." Everyone slowly returned to their conversations. Claire slipped her hand into mine. "You okay?" "I have been for a long time." She smiled. "Good." 6 months later, Claire and I stood in a small country church surrounded by family, friends, and people who had become part of the life I built from the ground up. As I looked at her across the aisle, I realized something. People say the truth always comes out. They're right. Sometimes it arrives in a confession. Sometimes it arrives in a courtroom. And sometimes it arrives on a faded receipt from a convenience store and leads straight to a cheap motel. That receipt didn't just expose my wife's affair. It gave me something I didn't know I needed. A chance to walk away with my self-respect, build a better life, and never look back. Thank you for watching.